Hi there, I'm Air. I use he, him.
And I'm Haley. I use she, her.
I'm Jerika. She, her. And this episode, we have an amazing, awesome guest, Lysa.
Yay.
Also known as Merciful DM or Lysa the Merciful. She is everywhere in the D&D community. If you have not heard of her yet, we are so glad you're here because it's about time. So Lysa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that was a great introduction. I'm Lysa. I go by she, her. I am a Dungeons & Dragons writer and also one of the community managers for the Adventurers League, D&D's official play. I play Mercy on Hellspells on the D&D Twitch channel, and I produce and host my own podcast called Behold Her, which is all about women in tabletop RPGs. So I wear a lot of hats.
And they look good on you.
Very stylish.
All right, should we start out with our traditional dungeon crawling?
Absolutely.
I know that I'm going to continue our theme from, well, I guess it was the last episode that I recorded with you guys. I was like, from the last episode that I was in, when we talked about our home game. I think we can call it a home game. I'm now having a crisis about whether a home game has to be in someone's home or if it can be on the internet. I think it counts.
If the home team doesn't have to be in your home, the home game.
The home is wherever your
What
D&D
is an away
is.
Game?
I don't know. Now I'm just.
This isn't this whole D-sports business that we should steer clear.
It's gone downhill already.
Tell us about the game that we know and love.
Oh my goodness. So on this week's misadventures of the Dear F List, we had real times adult talks. Not adult in a bad way, adult in a learn how to be an adult way, amongst our characters, and we worked out our differences, and it was really difficult. It was good, but it was also hard to be like, my character is being so mean to my friends.
The catharsis was real, yes.
Yes.
And there was a lot, because we're not very good at... I mean, there was a lot of hints dropped, but our characters aren't necessarily great at teamwork. So part of that is good communication. And so some of this stuff had been building up for a while.
Months,
so we were kind of tackling a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Lysa, have you ever had a moment at the table where you could cut the pretend tension with a knife?
Oh my goodness. I know I said I wasn't going to spoil anything from last night's Hell Spells, but at the end, there was a lot of intra-party tension because half of our party are people who murder on the reg, and the other half are people who would, oh my goodness, never. And it all kind of came to a head suddenly. And it was the rest of the episode was, oh, let's go to a party and have a lovely time. This is just what we need. So I wasn't expecting everything to go downhill so quickly.
Our DM had promised us, we had just managed to make it out of the Feywild and we'd been fighting tooth and nail for 2 months. And he's like, oh, it's going to be a relaxing episode. And instead it was emotionally the biggest 1-2 punch ever, and we were like, oh god, that was great, but I feel horrible.
So we were sailing by Mintarn, so we were going from the Moonshae to Waterdeep because Omen called us home. He's like, come on and see me. And we were like, uh-oh, what did we do? So I think there is an alternate reality where we actually did dock at Mintarn and it was happy fun times. But no, we
chose
the decision was made to not land at Mintarn and to instead have a grueling conversation about party dynamics.
We basically locked all of our characters in a room and made them become friends again. So hopefully things will be better, but we'll see next week.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
That's one way to resolve conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
Arcane lock and a lot of coffee,
Yeah.
Or just a giant strength 25 barbarian.
The real door, the muscle door.
Yeah.
My dungeon crawl was about me catching up with the rest of the Twitterverse because I've tried to avoid spoilers, but I've caught up to the point in Critical Role. Spoilers for anyone listening. You have been warned.
Oh no, I'm hiding. I'm so behind on all of the podcasts. It's fine.
A new character was introduced who was a Furball, and I had seen character art floating around and a lot of jokes, which I only now get, in that this Furball is the spinning image of one of my favorite people in the D&D community, Adam Kobold. So imagine him with his long pink hair, but as kind of a cow person.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to talk about this interesting evolution of the Furball race.
Aesthetic. Yeah.
Yeah, aesthetic is a really good way to put it. I've seen a lot of really cute art, especially of the last, 3 or so Furball characters on Critical Role who now have cow features, including sort of a bovine nose, which I think is where it all started, and some really cute ears that are cow-like. And that leads me right into my dungeon crawl, sort of. And I'm crawling ahead of time. I am crawling in preparation. I am starting my own mini campaign tomorrow.
Rad.
And this is my second attempt ever. The first one was the Pern game that I've talked about. I'm hoping this one will last longer, but we'll see. But one of my players is playing a Furball druid. And the first question I had for this player was, is it like the Critical Role Furbolgs? Do we have the cute nose and ears? And she's like, yes, of course. And I was like, yes, that's the right answer. So I'm super excited. I have 6 players currently, and I'm going to try my best. I don't have a very lavish DM style. I kind of try to play it on the thin side. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, keep me in your thoughts and prayers, if you will.
We're excited to hear the updates after your game.
Yes.
The evolution of the Furball is super confusing and shocking. I don't know if you've seen the old versions of them.
Look kind
that
of
they look like
giants.
Angry red-haired Vikings.
Yes.
They remind
yes.
me of the wildlings from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But they seemed, it seemed to me that they have sort of giant heritage or something like that. So I think that's kind of what makes them unique. What I've traced it to, and I could be completely wrong, but Matt Mercer, in one episode of Critical Role, he was describing Pumat Sol, who is a character. He's an NPC, and he's a Furball, and he said that Pumat Sol's nose was bovine. He had a bovine nose. And I think that's what started it. So they recently had a guest who came in and played a Furball, and all of the fan art of this character started including the nose and the ears. And I think it was sort of like someone was deducing that maybe all Furballs are like that. But I think it was, and I could be wrong, who knows, but I think it was almost like a miscommunication in a way, but I don't mind it. I think it's real cute. But it's definitely not anything I've ever seen before, especially in relation to the Furballs.
Matta went on to say in a tweet, he's officially just adopted it. He loves the art that's coming out of the community.
It's so
much.
cute.
It's adorable. Yeah, that's great. Lisa, also, did you have anything in Dungeons & Dragons this week that have caught your interest?
Yeah, my dungeon crawl is all about podcasts of Waterdeep.
Yes.
Which was announced, it was either this week or maybe last week. It was announced recently, where all of these amazing D&D actual plays are recording episodes that are all part of the same story arc that are around the Dragon Heist storyline in Waterdeep coming out this fall. I'm very, very lucky that I got invited to DM the penultimate episode in Waterdeep, and my guests are Scott Kurtz, who some folks probably know as Binwin Bronzebottom, TJ Storm, who's this awesome actor and also has appeared in Jock's Machina,
Yes.
Victoria Rogers, who DMs the Broadswords, and of course Rudy Rutenberg of Maze Arcana. And I'm incredibly excited and also super nervous to DM for them. But all of the Dungeon Masters,
awesome group.
yeah, all the Dungeon Masters have been getting together and doing like finger tapping, planning, and plotting together.
Nice.
So
That's
I'm
awesome.
really excited for that, for all of those to launch.
Now, will this give people a chance to get acquainted with maybe actual play streams that they haven't been able to before? Or is it people that we've sort of seen around?
Well, if you're less familiar with various D&D podcasts, this is certainly a cool way to get to know them and maybe find a podcast that you'd like to listen to. But most of them are more well-known podcasts. And then my episode and the last episode grouped together some actual play characters you might be familiar with. Going on these adventures. But I think even the existing podcasts with their casts have like 1 or 2 guests per episode.
Oh, cool.
That's
so
really
that
nifty.
should be really exciting.
Nice. I can't wait to see how like all these individual games just sort of like blend together into a cohesive unit. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
we've been all chatting and threading together our episodes, so I hope it turns out well.
I believe Watsy did like post stream of Annihilation, the podcasts of Annihilation, which were meant to kind of tie into that. But I think they were all standalone. It's really interesting to have them like all come together in one singular narrative. That's like epic in scope. That's very cool.
Yeah, they gave us this really great outline, and then just when you get a bunch of Dungeon Masters, we had like a Zoom call together. When you get everyone in the same virtual room, ideas just start happening and people mention something they're going to put in their episode and someone else is like, oh, I really want to integrate that in mine. So it has been very creatively fulfilling.
That's
Nice.
really cool. And I like that you brought up like mechanics cross-pollination, if you will. There was a game at the Stream of Many Eyes that had a sort of heist element, and that's kind of where we are now with this dragon heist coming out soon. And there was like a flashback mechanic where the players could, at any point, if they were in trouble or whatever, say that, oh, I planned this thing earlier and let me tell you what I did. Much like the trope in heist movies and things like that. And I was watching Honey Heist 2, Electric Bear Galoo, and I highly recommend it. I have not finished it yet, so it's not my official dungeon crawl, but they have a similar mechanic now, and I'm wondering if someone saw someone else's stream or something. So I love when you can kind of see that, that kind of people borrowing from each other. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a great mechanic. I might sneak that into my episode.
That is really cool.
But more importantly, Air, she is an alumna of Dungeons and Diners and Drive-Ins and Dragons and Dives or whatever that was. A charity stream. I can't remember which channel it was on.
WebDM.
I should. WebDM, of
WebDM,
course.
there
They
you
do
go.
all the good stuff. And I have to say, I fell in love with Lisa's work, but also with fun and exciting and silly Dungeons and Dragons. That was amazing, and I do appreciate the stream. If you have not seen it yet, please do. It's very great. And everyone should weep for the grease meat.
Oh my gosh,
Pour
the
one out.
grease meat. Emma, who DM'd that game, she did such a good job. I loved her NPC Grease Meat and his little voice and his little personality. I miss him.
He was really endearing.
But that was
for just a piece of meat.
Yeah, that was just one of the most bizarre but incredibly fun games I have ever played.
So anyway, sorry for the sidetrack, Air. You were talking about Hell's Bells.
Listen, any detour to Flavor Town is one worth taking. So, yes, we had noticed that in Hell's Bells, everyone is playing a tiefling, and we were wondering, what is your favorite race in D&D 5e currently? Is it tieflings or?
For the longest time, it was tieflings, and I'd say tieflings is still tied for first place. I just really like, it's just this class that feels like you can customize the flavor of the race in so many different ways. For example, I once played a tiefling whose heritage was a snake demon. So she had a snake bottom half of her body. This was before I knew about Yanti. She had a snake bottom half of her body and would wear long robes and constantly try to convince people that she had normal legs. So she would kind of like bob up and down a little bit when she walked. And there was one time when we had to climb up a cliff and I was like, okay, well, she like slithers up the cliff and then she gets up and like brushes her robes off. And so that's just really fun. Plus now in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, there's so many actual mechanical ways to customize your tiefling. That's really cool.
Yeah, all the different demon lord kind of backgrounds that you can come from, sort of thing.
Devils.
Yes, devils. Sorry, not demons. Other side of the blood war.
Yes.
These days, I'd say tiefling is up there tied with Yanti. I love playing Yanti too.
Nice.
I just finished playing a Yanti, well, NPC, but PC villain in another one of our DM's campaigns. He asked me if I could come in and be like the big bad for the campaign. And just being snaky is a lot of fun.
Yeah, being a snurson.
Oh, snurson.
I love it. Did you hug people violently?
As a snurson?
Yeah.
Yes. We have a snack friend who likes to hug.
A lot.
I don't think a lot of people were coming close enough to my character to be hugged. She was a Yanti bard who's left her Yanti compound or society to go spy on people. But she's not very good at it. Like, it's really obvious that she's a snurson. And she's not particularly nice. Like, she's got the emotional range of Spock, I'd say.
Oh boy.
Oh gosh.
That's one of the interesting things, because in 5e they kind of standardized like the look and feel of tieflings, but Yanti are still really like, you can be super snack, you can be just a touch a snack. So it's a fun thing to play with. I also thought it was a great way to flavor things, like you get poison spray. So like I described my characters, you know, the little dinosaur that eats Newman in Jurassic Park, the frills come out and start shaking and then so
Yes.
yeah. Awesome. So that leads into our next question, which is favorite race. Now, do you have a favorite class?
Favorite class? I really like trying to play different things every time I make a character. But I'd say my favorite class that I've played is Wild Magic Sorceress.
Yeah.
I am just a sucker for random tables. And I think probably my perfect character would be a Wild Magic Sorceress with the Wand of Wonder.
Oh my goodness.
God.
So much.
Just never know what's going to happen.
Can you tell me what the last thing that your wild magic did?
Oh my goodness.
If you can recall.
One of my favorite times, or wild magic surges, was when I was playing a game, and this was in season 4 of Adventurers League in Barovia, and there were special mechanics if somebody's character died. And I was playing at a table with my friend who really, really wanted to die so that he could trigger that special event. And so he was putting himself in harm's way. And this was maybe the 4th game where he was trying to do this and no DM would kill him. And we were fighting a vampire spawn and he was almost down. And my first ever wild magic surge was a unicorn who appears and
So
heals
good.
him.
I love it.
He was really mad.
We were playing Tomb of Horrors from Yawning Portal on Thursday. And I have a person in my group that we've been playing a very long time with, but she's a tiefling wild magic sorceress. And she is at the point where she can roll on the wild magic table she can do 2 rolls and pick which one she wants, which is pretty great. Her first roll was, you emit like flowers and sparkles for a minute or whatever. And the other one was the next attack you do, the creature who you're attacking gets vulnerability against the attack. So I'm like,
yeah.
well.
Sparkles. Yeah.
Right? Obviously it's the sparkles. But yeah, it kind of saved our butts. And yeah, she's done a lot of good with her wild magic, so it's fun.
My bard has 1 level of wild magics for the fact that it is so much fun. I've gotten the Featherbeard once. I have never gotten the self-targeted fireball, but I know it's coming one day.
I've never gotten that either, and I'm just waiting for it.
Yeah, I was turned into the potted plat once too, wasn't I?
I think the potted plant is Bert's true form.
Probably.
The potted plant's okay. Theo would take good care of you if you were a potted plant.
Definitely, yeah.
I've turned into a potted plant once, but it was triggered when I cast the invisibility spell, so nobody knows.
That's awesome.
That's perfect.
So our last question in terms of kind of like actual play, live play, do you have any advice for new actual play streams or podcasts to help them stand out in what has become a rather crowded field with the, rise of D&D as pop culture medium?
Yeah, there are so many actual play streams now. I love WebGM does this show called RPGN, which is sort of like a news show format, and they show clips. So that's kind of nice. You can catch all the different shows.
We had Power Score RPG on, who works on that as well.
Sean is great. He collects all the clips. I guess it's fun watching new shows that have some sort of theme. Like maybe they're taking place in a setting that you don't normally get to hear about too much in this edition. Or Hellspells, our shtick was that we were all tieflings. We all happen to just really, really love tieflings. So that was why. But it also got a lot of attention because people who love tieflings really love tieflings and they're excited about the show. But I think the most important thing is to just get a group of people who really enjoy playing together. And that comes off. Or that really, really shines when someone's watching. Like you can tell when people are having fun. And I think that's really the most important thing.
I definitely, dynamic for sure between the group is just, that's the kind of thing you just love watching. Watching those people have fun together it makes you feel that goodness and warmth of friendship. I'm getting schmaltzy. Someone stop me. Get the big hug.
No, I agree with you. Continue.
I have nothing else to say.
Make sure you love your people that you play with.
Indeed.
Yeah. And if you don't, find somebody you do.
All right. So we wanted to ask some general kind of story design and maybe some world building questions. So we were wondering about when you are designing things. We know that you have a wealth of experience here with Adventurers League, DM's Guild, and the upcoming Waterdeep work. We were wondering, what about a story do you think makes it a D&D game? Is there any common thread that you think tends to lend itself the best there?
I mean, I think that any situation can really become a D&D game. Especially if you have the right set of creative people who love shenanigans. One game that I played with some of my designer friends, and I think Grant Ellis is the guy who was running that game, but it was called Trouble in Pigton, and we were all pig farmers. And there ended up being more adventuring than we thought, but all of us signed up thinking this was basically just Farmville, the game, and we're really, really psyched for that. So if people can get excited about pig farming in D&D, then I feel like you could really get excited about anything. Now, what in a story makes for a good D&D game? That really depends on the style of play that you're going for. I think that those elements can be different for each one, but things that I love are a sense of story unfolding, like interacting with your environment and the people around you is helping you discover information. A really, really good hook, like some sort of mystery or really unique concept that gets people invested, makes for a good D&D story. And I'm the sort of player that I fall in love with every NPC I meet, even if they were just a name on a piece of paper and didn't actually have a personality planned out or anything. I adopt every NPC. So quirky NPCs who are memorable, I think, make for a great D&D game as well, especially because then hoping they survive, they can always be brought back.
You mentioned shenanigans. Could the shenanigans be what makes D&D? If you have shenanigans, you're on the right track.
Yeah, but I think the shenanigans have less to do with the Dungeon Master, so much less to do with the Dungeon Master, and everything to do with the players. At my weekly game, I'm always calling shenanigans on my guys because they love trying to think of ways to approach encounters that I would not have expected, or ways to use their magic items at every opportunity possible in ways I didn't expect. And that's fun because that keeps me on my toes. Often it's really, really funny and they feel really clever, and it makes for a good time.
That's relatable, definitely.
I think the shenanigans when you have that group dynamic is big. One of my favorite tweets I saw about D&D is like, what you think about D&D going into it. Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. What D&D actually is, it's always sunny in Baldur's Gate. Because it's just ridiculousness, yes.
Your answer there leads well into one of our other questions. Let's say I was going to go and find an adventure to run on DM's Guild. What would be some suggestions? How should I go about trying to find something that might match my DMing style or my player's style?
That is a really great question. I wish the Dungeon Masters Guild had more search functions that let you look for adventures in that way. I'd say one way to go about looking would be if you start familiarizing yourself with different designers, because a lot of designers kind of have their type of style of play that they enjoy, that they write for. But I've seen a lot of people actually go onto Twitter, and the hashtag D&D community is really great at recommending adventures. Like someone asked, is there an Adventurers League module or some other short one-shot that has no combat at all, because I'm trying to introduce someone who's really skeptical about D&D. And a lot of people chimed in with, I chimed in with a lot of like murder mysteries, which are more about investigating and that sort of thing. But I'd say Twitter's actually a really good source, because a lot of people who write for the Dungeon Masters Guild are also really active on Twitter and in the community. So I'm sure they'd love to recommend their stuff if it fits the bill.
I don't know if you've heard, Lisa, about adventurelookup.com.
No, what's that?
So Matt Colville's community, they had this idea because they were like, man, the DM's Guild is so great and there's so much content, but they were saying the search functionality is kind of limited, like you were saying. So his community got together, they got a team of programmers and basically a team of folks to just enter data, and they went through as many adventures and modules from every version of D&D and other products like Pathfinder, stuff from Paizo, and they had people tag them and write up short descriptions so you can do a search for terms like goblins, mountains, whatever you want, and it'll bring up adventures tagged like that, which you can then use to search for that specific adventure's name on the DM's Guild.
Wow, that's a really cool tool. I'm going to have to check that out after this.
We've talked about this before, and I think it's a lot of very data-driven.
Yes,
faceted searching. It's more objective and less subjective. So it's things like what are the baddies like? What setting is it in? What edition, etc. Is this a fun adventure? Is this a silly adventure? Is this a very serious adventure? Is this a gruesome adventure? They don't quite get that specific, but definitely starting with the edition that you're looking for is a great place. And some settings lend more to gothic horror, for example, than to rollicking fun times.
They also even do things like length. So if you're just like, I want something short that I can read over a weekend so I can quickly run it. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more objective facts about it, but it's at least a good starting point to find a few, and then absolutely, like you were saying, hit up Twitter and say, are these any good? Are these well written?
Yeah, that sounds great.
We think it's safe to say that D&D's rise to an unprecedented amount of popularity is likely due to this edition's embracing of a more diverse spectrum of players and fans than has been typical of, in other tabletop RPGs in the past. What do you think would be some of the next best steps that Wizards and the D&D community at large could take to continue this sort of trajectory of growth?
I think that 5th edition, granted, I'm completely biased because this is my first edition, and so I love it with all of my heart. I think that it is the most rules light, easily customizable, super approachable, easy to pick up version of the game. I remember wanting to play D&D in middle school or high school, and I looked it up and just thought, that is way too confusing. I don't know anyone who plays. There's no hope for me picking up this game. And I think 5th edition is very much the opposite of that, which I think makes it more approachable for more types of people who might not have experience with tabletop RPGs with like nitty gritty rules or war games or anything like that. I think something that D&D is doing really well that is recruiting just a more diverse fan base is what they've been doing with streaming on their Twitch. And showcasing more diverse casts like Rivals of Waterdeep, like Hell's Bells, so that when people are looking at Twitch and looking for D&D games, they can see one where there might be somebody on the cast who they identify with, or they even just see that there's lots of different types of people and that makes them more comfortable. In the Adventurers League, I felt very honored that I saw a lot of people come through my friendly local game store for my AL night because Adventurers League to them seemed like a good way to learn D&D 5th edition. And so many people would walk in the store and I'd ask them what brought them to our game night, and they would say that they were watching streams and it looked really fun. And all of their friends watch the same shows as they do, but none of them know how to play D&D, so they just wanted to learn. And they would come, they would learn the rules, and some of them would love Adventurers League and stay, and some of them would go home and have the confidence to teach their friends the rules and DM homebrew games for them. But there really were a surprising number of people who would walk in and say that they came to learn because of streamed games, which shouldn't be surprising because that's how I started. I started watching Critical Role and was like, oh yeah, D&D, I wanted to play that. This looks like a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to do that now. But when you're watching streamed games, you're like at home alone with your computer and snacks. So you don't realize that, oh yeah, those counts of those viewer counts, those are actually people around the country and world who are also watching, who are falling in love with this game and wanting to play as well.
We're all big Acquisitions Incorporated fans, particularly the C team, which is why we're so excited to see you have Alyssa Grant and Kate Welch on Behold Her, because they're some of our favorite people in the community for sure. But that's how we all met. We were all just fans on Twitter and connected together and started to play. And it really does seem to be that is kind of the gateway to so many people now, is just watching other people play online. And it's so awesome to see like that love of the game amongst the community just spread outwards, fractally onwards and forever. We have Joe Manganiello talking to Stephen Colbert about,
oh my God, that interview
is so awesome.
I felt like ASMR tingles watching that interview because all they did was just straight up talk about D&D.
Oh, they geeked
and
out
watching
so
them
hard.
just nerd out, and like the audience, you could tell it's definitely a step that they were doing that, but there were people in the audience who I'm sure were like, what the heck is going on? I have no idea what a Bahamut is. But just, we've made some steps, nerds, and that feels great.
I think too, like you mentioned, streaming, I think it's gotten a lot easier to make D&D your drug of choice these days. I think even like 5 years ago, you would have to go to Reddit and, post in a looking for group thread or something like that if you wanted to play online. But the tools have become more sophisticated. And now it's as easy as dropping into the Discord of your favorite stream, like your favorite D&D stream or streamer. And they might even just have a looking for group channel, and you might be in a new game in under a week, which is how I found my crew for Tuesdays. So I think people are recognizing the popularity and making it super, super, super easy to find people to play with.
Oh, definitely. And again, that's those Discord channels, they're being facilitated by these streamed shows. I think that's just really cool.
It also kind of guarantees you know to some degree, the tastes of the people coming to your table. If you really like this show so much to be part of the fandom, it's probably going to be that kind of game you'd enjoy playing as well.
It's really about culture, right? So like if let's say you're watching Critical Role, there are stories and people in the form of NPCs or PCs and situations and places that pretty much anyone in that Discord hopefully would be familiar with because they've watched the show. So you drop the group in a place or they meet a PC or NPC or, it's a situation they've seen before. That is a common thing that another group might not have, but it would bring so much joy. For example, we might get a Rosie B. Stinger cameo here, perhaps in the F list. No promises, but we might. We had an Omen one, and we all know who Omen Drawn is in our game. So just meeting him was really cool because we know who he is, and he's pretty powerful and astute and interesting. So it's just hooking into that culture and hooking up with fans. It's another way to perform your fanness.
Yeah, celebrate your things you love.
There you go. So we have a couple more questions for Lysa, and then we will get into those cues. What active projects are you working on that you might want to share with us?
If you're allowed to share.
Okay.
If you can.
Yeah, upcoming projects are really hard for me to talk about because there's a lot I don't think I can talk about. Podcasts of Waterdeep. I'm actually recording my episode with those awesome guests right after we record this podcast. I'm very excited about that. That is coming out in September. And I'm also writing one of the Eberron adventures that the Guild Adepts are working on. We have an adventure path that we announced. And I believe there are, 10 or so adventures, and I am writing one of them. Don't want to give away too much about what happens in the adventure, but I'm very psyched for that, again, because 5th edition was my first foray into D&D. I'm less acquainted with Eberron than the other Guild Adepts are, but their excitement for this setting is so palpable that getting to work with them on this adventure path is probably the best way to get acquainted with Eberron.
The buzz around the Wayfinder's Guide was palpable online, watching everyone like, yes, finally, not just FR.
Love it.
Yes.
What are you excited about for things that are coming up in 2018 and 2019?
Most of the things I'm excited about are things that my friends are working on, which I also probably can't talk about. And my life is pretty much all D&D right now, so it's hard to pick non-D&D things. Something I'm really excited about for later this year, and actually later this month. I am going to be visiting PAX West, and several other cast members of Hell's Bells are all converging into what we call the Hag House, our Airbnb. And that includes your friend and mine, Mazbataz, coming all the way from the UK. So we are really excited for all of us to actually meet each other in person. And go to PAX West. There might be some super secret costumes in the works. That is going to be a blast.
That is
we
amazing.
Will keep our
I
eyes
would bet Maz.
peeled.
They probably have like a suitcase just full of knitted goods for everyone.
Oh yeah.
I feel so bad for Maz. I basically through messages here and there have given them like a whole grocery list of things I want from the UK. Like bring me some Ribena and bring me mint arrow chocolates.
Yes.
The good chocolate.
And they're just like, oh, I guess I'm doing your grocery shopping then.
Nice. I can't wait to live PAX West vicariously through all of the Twitter activity.
Oh yeah, there'll be pictures for sure.
It'll be exciting. Sometimes we answer questions. And this is one of those times. I will start with one, which is submitted by Desmond, in all caps, just for the record. One of my party members came up with a proposal. This person wants to give the DM a cool name instead of the usual plain old dungeon master to increase our immersion. But I'm not sure if that's a good idea, since the DM is not supposed to be part of the story. While writing this, I came up with an idea. What if the entire story was told by some omnipotent transdimensional being that's telling the story as it happens? But they were wondering if anyone had any thoughts on this. I just thought
this is a really cool idea.
Interesting concept if you're into, like, we were talking earlier about that, like, cinematic feel with the flashbacks. I feel like this could be a cool, like, stylistic thing that you could adopt.
I feel like I would personally have difficulty doing that for, like, a whole huge campaign, just because I would feel you'd really have to improv on the spot if there's, like, a particular voice, way of speaking that this person has, or any of that. But for a one-shot, I think it's totally doable. One of the adventures that I released relatively recently, Rats of Waterdeep, is a murder mystery, and all of the box text is written in the style of a film noir detective narrating to himself. And one of the characters, this tiefling named Bogart Locks, has this quirk where he's always kind of staring into the distance and narrating what's going on out loud. And he actually follows the characters around and stuff. He's an NPC, though. He's not so much the dungeon master.
That is awesome. I was immediately thinking, like a noir voiceover style thing. Some, gravelly voice occasionally taking a drag of a cigarette as it relates information.
It reminds me of Rocky Horror.
That's so good.
Let me take you on a strange journey. I think this is a really cool idea because it has a more sweeping flavor, I think. So it's almost like you're invoking perhaps some higher power that might or might not show up in your game. I can see that it's a little bit different than the role of the actual dungeon master, and it might be a little confusing if you're playing Bahamut, for example, or some avatar of Bahamut, and that's what you're calling yourself. But something like the Scribe of Ages or something like that, I think would be interesting to lend a feel of this is a story that people are going to tell other people later on.
Right, like it's being
like
told by a bard in an inn.
It reminds me of The Name of the Wind, but that's a different story altogether. It's just because as you're going through the adventures, it's your journey, so you feel that maybe you aren't special. I don't know. That's how I feel sometimes. But I just hit level 15 with my highest character, and, I'm big news. Like, I'm, Jerika's important.
Kind of a big deal.
So, if the person who's quote unquote telling the story is, the muse of adventurers past or whatever you will, that kind of reminds the players that, oh wait, you're important and your actions have consequences.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's important to figure out something where it doesn't feel like the story's already written.
Yeah.
And it can also be hard to have that sort of long view. Like, who knows if, like, the adventurers are like, ooh, let's go kill the Avatar Bahamut. That's what we want to do right now.
Uh-oh, you're killing the narrator.
Yeah.
We have a question from Foxfire66. They're looking for any advice or guides or resources for writing adventures. This might be a lot to unpack, so maybe we can stick to like a top 3 or top 5 advice. But they tried DMing a pre-written module, but it didn't work out as well because they felt like they kept having to like reference back to all the notes, and they think they might have an easier time remembering things and improvising that if it's not written down and has to kind of stick to that pre-written adventure. But they're looking for some advice on coming up with ideas or a basic structure for things. So maybe I'll throw this one to Lisa. Any like tips or tricks that you find that help you in structuring things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned how to structure my adventure writing just from reading all of the hardcover books and reading a lot of other adventures, especially in the Adventurers League. I think even if you're running something that's a pre-written module, it's okay to not have everything memorized. If you're running a good module, it'll be organized so that it is easy for you to reference the information that you need. That is part of why I like running Adventurers League things, because I feel like especially the better adventures are written always in the same structure. You know exactly where to find the information. But if you want to write your own things, I guess one resource that I would really recommend would be James Intricasso's blog, which I'm not remembering the URL off the top of my head.
We will find it and tweet it after this episode comes out.
Yeah, he writes a lot of really good articles about like how to design a monster, how to write this type of adventure. So his blog is he's an amazing writer too. So definitely check out his blog as a resource.
Worldbuilderblog.me.
Yes.
Just a man in his homeworld.
.u?
.air.
This is going to become a Abbott and Costello bit very quickly.
Yes, that's why I'm here. Can we ask a fun one?
Yes,
No.
Let's do a fun. No fun.
Yeah,
What
let's-
about the
yeah,
shenanigans?
yeah.
We have to bring it back to the shenanigans.
fun ones.
Yay! D&D puns and jokes for world building, submitted by Afan Torla. Afan Torla. I'm like, there's definitely more than one R in there. Sure. Okay. They're wondering about ways to incorporate jokes and puns into the world that you're building.
This is
What do we
something
think about
we should
this?
have asked Maz when Maz was on.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know everyone's view
Everyone's
on
take.
this.
Yes, everyone's view is puns.
Something I like to do is include a lot of tiny Easter egg references in mine, especially for people's names. So like Bogart Locks, like Bogart Humphrey and all of his like film noir things, and then Sherlock Holmes. So combining that's a little bit punny for people who find it. And then sometimes I'll name people the opposite of what their personality is. So that adventure has a receptionist who could not care less or could not care more. I don't know, whatever. She's very blasé, just wants to do her crossword puzzles, and wants the adventures to go away. And her name is Joy, which people really enjoy.
Nice. I think actually Chris Straub did the thing that you just mentioned, and I didn't realize this until recently, but apparently Legati, which is the name of Chris Straub's PC's Familiar, is a reference to Thomas Legati,
Yes.
Legati.
who is a writer and one of Chris Straub's, people that he reads a lot. And so that's kind of like a
secret
hint.
an Easter egg.
An Easter egg. Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I've run games sort of with themes and with Easter eggs. I ran a game that was sort of Magic School Bus based, and that was actually really cool.
That sounds awesome.
The people who delivered sort of like the little note at the beginning that they get were all of the students in the class. And like one of them like asked one like, "What's your name, boy?" And I didn't have it prepped because why would they ask that? So I spelled Arnold's name backwards, and I'm like, that's obviously their name. And I have to say, Honey Heist 2, and I'm sure the first one as well, is a masterclass in this. There are so many puns and jokes, all bear related, and it's a wealth of bear puns and references, and it just shows you how fun and silly and ridiculous this TTRPG thing that we do is.
It's not all serious and fighting.
No. But sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is. I feel like most of the time it gets pretty silly.
Yes, indeed.
When you were talking about earlier editions, I too am a convert as of 5e, but going back and looking at them all as you were talking about previous editions and learning about them, I think I would have bounced off too, because I would have been like, Thacko, no.
Gotta bring that up.
Yeah, and this is why my group, I try to tone it down a bit.
And you could have an NPC, maybe it's a Modron, named Thacko.
Yeah.
That, like, the other characters just, like, I don't want to say abuse, because that's not nice, but not treat very well. And, you know, maybe that's a thing.
So, Lisa, before we finish up for the night, could you give us some places that people can go to find you and your work?
I am super active on Twitter, so people can find me at MercifulDM, MERCYFULDM. Pretty much everything I do gets mentioned or linked there eventually. But if you want more of like a static page, I also have a website, lisachen.com, Lisa also spelled with a Y, and that has my D&D portfolio and also a bunch of other creative endeavors that I do.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us here on Inside Check. It was great to get.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Your insight and expertise. I have one more question, and it's not D&D related.
Okay.
This is a question that Haley wants to ask.
This is where it goes off the rails.
It's gonna go off the rails. I know you sometimes post beautiful, beautiful pictures of flowers. And
Thank you.
I was wondering if you have a favorite flower.
Ooh, that changes like every week.
What is it this
week?
week?
One of my favorite flowers, because when I was training as a floral designer, it was the first new flower that I was introduced to, is a scabiosa. It has a terrible name that also kind of sounds like a curse from Harry Potter.
It does.
Scabiosa.
But it's this really dainty flower with these outer petals and then these like tiny miniature flowers that make up the middle of it. It's really, really lovely. I love that guy.
I think my mom has this in her garden. I call it the firework flowers because they look like little like pom-poms.
They do appear to be bursting, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. My mom has this huge garden, and I have started my own garden as of this past week, so I'm feeling very flower obsessed.
Ah, well, congrats on your new garden.
Thank you. And on that un-D&D related note, shall I take us out?
Yes, please.
Thanks for joining us again for another episode of Insight Check. I hope that you learned as much as we did from our wonderful guest this week. And we just want to give our usual shout out to the wonderful Amy T. Falcone for our artwork and to Vinswapped for the music that we use for our intro and outro. And if you could take a moment to give us a review on iTunes, that really helps us a lot. We appreciate all of you who have written reviews and rated us there. We couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you.
Answering your cues from our collective A's. This
was
Insight
Check.
Ooh, sound effects.
train.
I have a personal train.
The Lisa train.
That's so
Yeah,
nice.
It's the D&D train. Everybody better get on it.
Yeah, how do you get one of those?
I live by the train tracks, and you get used to a train going directly past your house, except for when you do things like stream or record things. Very convenient.
This is why we have at the end of our podcast a lovely bloopers section.
That's true.
Well, either we'll get a great editor to cut it in post, or just add kind of generic train sounds throughout the entire game. We'll just pretend we were in the dining car. Yeah, exactly. We had this dinner while,
we're going to Eberron.
Ozarks.
Everybody, come on.